They were in Yud Dalet Amud Aleph, middle of a discussion. We are about 20 lines in the bottom of the page, 14a. But Omar Cross, first words on the line, and we're at Kol Hecha, end of the line. Okay, this review where we are. Okay, so Gemara was looking for the source that Mitzas HaYavam, death of the Yavam, which effectively eliminates the possibility of Yibum, frees a woman from the Zika, the fact that she is Zikuka, she's in a state of sort of limbo to the Yavam. If the Yavam dies, she's freed. How do we know that? from a regular married woman. Regular married woman, very severe penalty. Mitzas Habal, if the husband dies, she's freed. Similarly, or at least certainly, if a yavam, which is a relatively minor prohibition, she's prohibited because of the yavam. If the yavam dies, she should be freed. Okay. Now the Gemara wants to know, maybe a get would work as well. One of the ways to free a yavam would be chalitza, misa yavam, and also a get. Okay. And the Gemara says, kal v'chaimer, chalitza does not work for a get. That's because it's specifically Xeris Akosov. The Torah indicates to us that only get works for married women. Chalitza doesn't work. If that's the case, if Chalitza doesn't work for a married woman, get still works. Chalitza, where it does work for a Yavam, for sure, get should work as well. So the Gemara's response was, Kacha le'ikuva. Kacha means you should follow these instructions. Okay, an ikuva is different, like we pointed out yesterday, is different than a miyut. The miyut is a limitation that clearly implies that it would be limited specifically to chalitza and not divorce. Kacha is not a miyut. Kacha is ikuva. Kacha says basically these instructions are the only way to go about it. And the Gemara presumes because you have the word kacha, you have an ikuva, therefore you cannot learn a kal v'chaimer. And now the Gemara questions that assumption. Kol heichad ikuva lo darsh kal v'chaimer. Wherever we have an ikuva, a word that basically says do it as follows, then we would not, you're telling me that we would not use kal v'chaimer to include in other methods. The problem is that doesn't seem to be the case. For Yomei Kippurim, the avodah, the service of Yom Kippur, the Torah says, gerol v'chuka. Okay, so one of the components to the service was where there were two sheep, and the Kohen Gadol would make a lottery. There were two bricks. One of them said Lashem, one of them said Lazazel. He would take the brick that said Lashem, that was the sacrifice. Lazazel was the one that was going off the cliff. Okay, now, generally speaking, how do you sanctify an animal? When you buy it. You buy it, you declare, we'll soon see in the Gemara, when you buy the animal, you declare this animal should be an oil Hashem. You declare it to be an oila. Now, let's say a guy buys an animal and then he makes a lottery with two bricks and he puts the one that says Lashem onto his animal. It does not constitute separating the animal from oila. This works specifically for the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur in the Beis HaMikdash, where we say the lottery works. Not only that, not only does the lottery work, actually, if the Kohen Gadol says this should be the one that's Lashem, this one should be the Lazazel, it does not work. It must be a girl. It must be a lottery. So he has these two bricks, and the two bricks, he takes out the brick without looking, whichever one says Lashem, that's the one that's Lashem, the other one's Lazazel. It always happens until late in time in the second Beis HaMikdash. The one on the right side of the Kohen was always Lashem, and the one on the left side was always Lazazel. It's one of the miracles of the temple. Okay, so Torah says girl, a lottery. And in the parsha of Yom Kippur, of the service of Yom Kippur, it says the word chukah. Chukah means a chayk. It's a rule. It's an instruction. That's a limitation. V'tanya, and yet, despite the fact that we have ikuva of chukah, basically these are the instructions. At Tanya we learned, v'oso chatos. You should prepare the animal as a chatos. What does that mean? Hagirl ois chatos, v'ein Hashem ois chatos. The lottery declares which one is the chatos, the offering. V'ein Hashem ois chatos, but declaring it is ineffective. It doesn't help. Shiachal, I would think, it's a kal v'chaimer. Kiddush Hashem, a regular person, he buys an animal. If he makes a lottery, it does not sanctify the animal. It doesn't declare the animal to be a specific type of sacrifice. But what does work is Kiddush Hashem. When he says this should be Oil Hashem, Chatas Hashem, Hashem Hashem, yes.
Please.
About 15 lines, 14a, 15 lines, roughly 15 lines on the bottom. First one line is din. About 11 lines, maybe 8 lines above the wide lines. Okay, any din Kiddush Hashem. So in a regular scenario where girl lottery does not work, specification does work. Makom shekiddush a girl, in the scenario where the girl works, the lottery works. That's in the Kohen Gadol, for the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur in the Beis Hamikdash. Ain't din shekiddush Hashem. Certainly, if the Kohen Gadol declares it to be a chatos, it should work even without the lottery. Talmud Loimar, so the pasuk says, "V'asahu chatos." He'll make the lottery. He'll do the lottery. V'asahu chatos. The lottery will declare which one's the chatos, which one's the offering, which one's going off the cliff. La'azazel. The lottery declares the chatos, and the name declaring which one should be the chatos actually doesn't work. Okay. The time of the Maite Kra, the reason here is because the Torah says also chatos. But if not for the fact that the Torah writes v'aso chatos, we would use a kal v'chomer to tell me that not only does girl work, lottery work, but also declaring the type of sacrifice would work as well. Even though the Torah writes chukah, it's a rule, it's an ikuva. Chukah means follow these instructions. These instructions, nothing else. We see here that an ikuva does not constitute a limitation to exclude the possibility of something being included because of a kal v'chomer. You can still have an ikuva, a specific set of instructions, and include something with a kal v'chomer. So we're back to the original question. Why? Maybe one of the methods to extricate a woman from the state of Zika, her eligibility for Yibum, is divorce her. So the Gemara says, Amakra law, because of law, Sefer Krisis, you write to a woman who you want to divorce, you write her a divorce. Law tells me that you write to her, V'lo Yivama, but not for Yivama. In other words, divorce only works in the case of a woman who's getting divorced, not in the case of a woman who's zekuka liyibum. Ve'ema law lishma. Maybe law tells me that it has to be written for her sake. In other words, the divorce has to be written for her. So the Gemara says trei laksifi. The word law is repeated twice. Okay, fine. Vakatim ibarle, but I still need chad law lishma. One to tell me that law means it has to be written specifically for her. Ve'idach law v'loy law ulchaverta. Let's say a man marries two women with identical names. So you'd think that you can write one divorce and write the word, his wife would be written in plural. And you can give the divorce to both wives. And therefore the Torah writes law, you have to write it for her. You can't write v'lo law ulchaverta. Two women can't be divorced with the same document. Okay. El Amakra, the pasuk says, na'al na'al. I'm sorry, na'al. Okay, with regard to chalitza, the Torah specifies using a shoe. Na'al, specifically, a shoe has to be used midi achroni lai. You can only do chalitza with a shoe. You can't divorce her to get rid of the zika. Samar says, "V'hay na'al lahachud also is does na'al come to tell me that you can only permit her to remarry with a shoe, meaning with chalitza, as opposed to divorce. We need it for something else. Because the Tanya we learned. Na'alai, his shoe. Ainli ela na'alai, his shoe. Na'al shall call them na'alai. How do we know it doesn't actually have to belong to him? It could be anyone's shoe. Talmud Loimar na'al, the shoe, like anyone's shoe. Na'al riba comes to include all shoes, even if he doesn't actually own it. Imke ma Talmud Loimar na'alai. So why does the Torah say na'alai? Na'alai haroilai. It has to be an appropriate fitting shoe. Prat l'godol she'en yachal halach bay. If the shoe is too big, that when he walks, his foot comes out of the shoe, that's too big. Similarly, prat l'koton she'en chayfes roiv ragli. Or a shoe that's too small, it doesn't cover most of his foot. Prat l'misulam she'en l'misulayim she'en le'ekev. It excludes a shoe that has no heel. There's no bottom to it, no sole. Okay, and these are all learned from Na'alai. It says Im Kenechtiv Kro Nal, my Hanal Shma Mino Tarte. The event of Chalitza is called Beis Chalutz Hanal. The Hanal Vashu, that is two limitations. One, that it has to be a shoe that fits him, and number two, that specifically a shoe is what frees a woman who's Zikuk L'Yibam and nothing else. Okay. Next mission, this leads us into a quite a discussion. Next, probably about a week, maybe a little bit longer, about the laws of Eved Ivri. So if you remember, when we learned gittin, we had a couple of dafim where we learned how to emancipate an Eved Ivri. And if you want to keep an Eved Ivri, these are basically a lot of the laws pertaining to an Eved Ivri. I guess then it's probably worthwhile to give a little bit of background. There were three types of Eved Ivris. Okay. Basically, we're familiar with the concept of an Eved Ivri. Mm-hmm. Basic idea of Eved Ivri, Jewish slave. Okay. How does a Jew become a slave?
Sells himself.
So what it's called a meicher.
Sold for debt he owes.
One's called meicher atzmai. If he is sold, he's typically sold not because of the debt, but because he's stolen. That's called a nimkar bezdin. So there's a nimkar bezdin.
I guess also he can be sold by the court if he can't make good on what he owes because of the lost court judgment.
I don't think so. I think nimkar b'nei vasa. He's sold.
Is that a shibuda also?
We'll get to that in a moment.
Okay.
The answer to that is that it's complicated.
Okay.
So in Eved Ivri, there's a nimkar atzma, he sells himself. He may be selling himself to pay back debt, that could be. Or he's nimkar bezdin, he's typically sold because he stole. The court is selling him. The third category, which also Torah deals with separately, is a nimkar la'ovid l'chavim, where he sells himself to a non-Jew. Or a Jewish owner sells him to a non-Jew, which has its own set of laws. Okay, I guess we'll go through a few, just very briefly, a few critical. We'll soon see the specifics here. We'll really get stuck today in the middle of a Gemara, which we won't finish until tomorrow or the next day. Just go through a few of the general rules of an Eved Ivri. Okay, let's say the Eved Ivri, he's a slave. How long is he a slave for? 6 years. Unless Yovel comes first. We'll have to see where's the source that Yovel will end every type of slavery. It's ended by Yovel. Yovel frees everybody. He's a slave for 6 years. After 6 years, let's say he refuses to leave. He wants to continue staying as a slave. So he drills his ear. That's called ritzia. His ear gets a hole in it, and then he's a slave until Yovel, until the end of the 50 years. In terms of the shibuds, a 6-year slave is inherited by his sons specifically, not the estate. There's no general rule. The sons can inherit a 6-year slave, not the estate. In other words, if there are no sons, the daughters, the father, brothers, etc., do not inherit a 6-year slave. A slave that's a nirtza, meaning he is a slave that went through the process called ritzia, his ear was drilled, is not inherited period. We'll see in the mission in a moment. When a slave leaves, there's something called ha'anaka. These are gifts. You give a slave gifts when he leaves. The more gifts, the greater the merits. So you can give the minimum amount, but it's a mitzvah to give him a gift. Okay. Kitayv la'imach means that an Eved Ivri has to be treated just like you. Kitayv la'imach means that Torah says give him gifts when you leave, because when he leaves, give him gifts, because while he was with you, it was tayv la'imach. It was good for him to be with you. What does that mean? And that from there the Gemara says it has to be with you, with your eating, with you with your drinking. Come to the Kiddush, whatever, the Kiddush room here in the back where the real goods are. Got to bring them in too, right? Can't just take it for yourself. Can't l'chaims have to be done with the slaves, with the Eved Ivri. Moreover, we'll see in the Gemara later. The Gemara says that kind of Eved, kind of Adam Latzna. Somebody who acquires an Eved Ivri, he's acquiring a master for himself. Why would anyone want to do that to themselves? It's a very good question. It could be that the purpose of an Evet Ivri is exactly that. It's really to show somebody how you're willing to humble yourself in front of an Evet Ivri. It's tzaddikim that would have the Evet Ivri. Could be not. Okay. Anyway, another rule of Evet Ivri is that the Evet Ivri does not have the right to refuse his master providing him to any indentured maidservant. This would be a shifcha kananis for the purpose of reproduction. The children do not belong to the Evet Ivri; they belong to the master.
This is a non-Jewish maidservant.
All right, so that's the quasi non-Jewish maidservant.
Okay.
So she is technically Jewish, but she has a lot of limitations. She's not a full-fledged Jew. She's a shifcha kananis.
Okay.
And the master can require the slave to sleep with his shifcha kananis for the purposes of reproduction, or even otherwise. This might be a shifcha charufa. There's a few explanations what a shifcha charufa is. Not necessarily. There's no yachas. There's no family structure here. So he can give her for one night and say the woman shouldn't sleep with him a different night, or can give it to any one of his shifcha kananis that he owns. It's not a marital relationship. Okay. What else should go through? Okay, and then there's another category of similar to Evet Kanani, which would be the Evet Kanani could be both the male or female. We'll see there might be some limitations if you're female. The dinim, the laws are not exactly the same. And another type of Evet Ivri that's actually a woman is called an Amma Ivriya, which is an entirely different affair. We'll learn about Amma Ivriya more in detail later. But at this point, the Gemara is going to want to compare and contrast Amma Ivriya to Evet Ivri. Amma Ivriya is sold once she's 6 years old for a maximum of 6 years, or until she shows signs of maturity. And there is a marital context to Amma Ivriya, which is that the master or his son is allowed to marry her, as long as there's at least a shava pruta left of the sale. So let's say he sold a 6-year-old girl for, I don't know, $600 for 6 years. So what does that work out? It's $100 a year. That works out per day to what's the cost per day? About 33 cents per day, right? Whatever, less than about 30 cents a day, or less than 30 cents, 29 cents a day. So let's say she's on her last day and it's already half the day has gone through. So then how much value is left in her? 12.5 cents, let's say. 12 cents, whatever it is, a couple of hours, less than a dime. He can no longer marry her because it's less than the shava pruta left at the sale. There's no way to convert her slavery into Kiddushin. Side point, okay. 1 second. One more point. Giroin kesef, very important. Giroin kesef means that a slave, there are different ways to redeem. Okay, let's say that an Amma Ivriya can redeem herself, or her father can redeem her. How do you redeem her? Like we said, $600 for 6 years equals, I don't know, it's 29 cents a day, 28 cents a day. And as many days every day that you give 28 cents for, she's a slave for one less day. So you can redeem her, you can buy her back.
The owner doesn't want to go along with that.
It's not up to him. And the same thing is true of an Evet Ivri. And the same thing is true of an Evet that's sold to a non-Jew. With regard to an Evet that's sold to a non-Jew, the Torah has another category of redemption, which is Ku'ulas Kroivim, that relatives can redeem him. Not just himself.
That could be any Evet sold to a non-Jew?
Any Evet Ivri sold to a non-Jew. Okay, now we'll, by the way, with regard to all these types of slaves, with regard to the slave that's a Nimkar Atzma, Nimkar Bezdin, and Nimkar La'akum. Are you familiar with those terms?
No.
Okay, again, Nimkar Atzma is he sold himself. Nimkar Bezdin is the court sold him. And Nimkar La'akum means he was sold to a non-Jew. Okay. All those avodim are called, have the word used to describe them occasionally is the word sachir. Sachir literally means a day laborer. Sachir is a word that's used often in conjunction with pile. There's a moderate difference between a sachir and a pile. It's an hourly laborer or per job labor, but they're both workers. That's the difference between a sachir and a pile. Now, they're all called sachir, and the question is, are all the sachirs compared to each other? Which means, do we apply all the laws of Nimkar Bezdin to Nimkar Atzmai, and all the laws of Nimkar Gai to Nimkar Bezdin and Nimkar Atzmai, and in reverse as well? Do we say right? Because the Torah discusses each category separately. Okay. Says the Mishnah, Eved Ivri, an Eved Ivri, Nikna B'Kesef, you could buy him with money, Ubishtar with a document. Two methods. The Kaina Atzma, he acquires himself. Number one, Bishanim, 6 years. Ubi Yovel, right, the 50-year cycle. There were only, by the way, a handful of Yovels in the history of the Jewish people. Right, there was Yovels for most of the first temple, but excluding the last 30 so years. Is 18 years. And the Charash went into exile. No, it was earlier. It was already, but the Aseres Shvatim it was much more than that. It was already probably close to 100 years before the destruction of the temple. As soon as Golos and Chera picked them out, there was no more Yovel. The key component for Yovel is most of the Jewish people have to live in Eretz Yisrael. And I'm not sure that there was Yovel in the second temple. There may have been. If it wouldn't have been fairly wrong.
What number? You say about 18, maybe, or less than.
What was that?
That they had before the.
So Yovel existed from the time the second temple was consecrated until probably 100 years before the destruction.
I mean, the
first temple.
Yes.
That would be by Golos and Cherav when the 10 tribes were exiled.
So you saw that to be about like 18 of them that occurred.
Figure, so if there's 430 years,
yeah.
So you have that would be maximum of 410 years, a maximum of 8 cycles, but really probably 2 of them didn't happen. So probably 6 in the first temple, second temple, maybe another 6 or 7, maybe. So
a little bit close to like 12, 13-ish. Okay.
Yeah, something like that.
Thank you.
Okay, and by the way, this is one of the complaints. Yirmiyah is very upset that Jewish people at some point stopped respecting Yovel. And they keep their Eved every way past the 6 years and way past Yovel. I believe it's in the Haftarah. I can't remember which Haftarah it is. There's one Haftarah that talks about this.
Can a Hebrew slave buy out his own contract?
That's right. Next one is Ubegeroin Kesef. Geroin Kesef is an interesting terminology. Basically, it means that the master must participate in his redemption. How does he participate? By prorating the slavery. So if he has the money and he decides to sell himself, and then he wants to take the same money that he used to sell himself and redeem himself, it's perfectly acceptable, and it's not up to the master. It's the third method for him to acquire himself. Yisrael Olav Amma Avriya has an additional method. She acquires herself with signs of physical maturity, puberty. Hanirtza, the guy whose ear was drilled, he's acquired with his ear being drilled. The kind of esatzma b'yovel ub'misa'adin. He acquires himself with yovel. It's the 50-year cycle. Ub'misa'adin, or if the master dies. Okay, let's begin the Gemara. Eved Ivri nikna b'kesef minolan. How do we know that an Eved Ivri is acquired with kesef? Amar Kra, the pasuk says. Okay, this discussion here is a Eved hanimkar la'akum. Remember what that is? Yeah. Sold to a non-Jew. Mikesef miknasai, he's able to redeem himself from the money that he was purchased. Well, obviously, then he was purchased with money. That's how we know that an Eved could be bought with kesef. Malamich nikna b'kesef. Eshkan Eved Ivri hanimkar la'akum. We know an Eved Ivri that's sold to an Ovek Chavim, to a non-Jew. Since you buy him with kesef, makes sense that he's redeemed with kesef. And moreover, kesef is the main agent of acquisition for a non-Jew. A non-Jew, generally speaking, acquires everything with kesef, because Mashiach and Hagbah is only the law for a Jew. The Torah says that when a Jew buys to somebody else, what's the terminology? Miyad amisacha, from the hand of your friend. What does that mean? Davar nikna miyad liyad, something that's acquired with your hand. How do you acquire something with your hand? You pick it up, do kinyan hagbah. Or you have an animal, it's too big to pick it up, you schlep it with your hand, you pull it. It's called Mashiach. A non-Jew does not have kinyan davar nikna miyad liyad. Yes, kinyan kesef, that's what would make sense that an Eved Ivri is acquired with kesef. Nimkar li Yisrael minolan. How do we know somebody who sold to a Jewish person is acquired with kesef? Amakra v'hifta. The hefta is a discussion by Omaha Ivriya. She is able to also redeem herself with money. Redeem herself. Redeem herself means if she's the hefta, she's redeeming herself. Presumably that means she was acquired with money as well. Okay. So Amma Ivriya, we said, has a marital component. Marriage also works with kesef. So it makes sense why Amma Ivriya would have kesef as one of the methods of acquisition. However, Eved Ivri, minolan, how do we know that a regular slave could be acquired with kesef? So Gemara says, Amar Kra, the pasuk says, Ki yimkar lecha achicha ha'ivri, ay ha'ivriya. This here is talking about Meicher Atzmai, a slave who's selling himself, and it compares the slave selling himself to the Amma Ivriya. I'm sorry, to a he compares the Eved Ivri to an Eved Ivriya, to an Amma Ivriya, and therefore we say both of them could be acquired with Kesef. 1 second. Hold on. Sorry, that pasuk is not Meicher Atzmai. That pasuk is Nimkar Bezdin. Eshkem Achru Bezdin. That 1 second. Oh, okay. Rashi says. Okay. That pasuk ki mocher l'cha means when he will be sold, which presumes that somebody else is selling them. Eshkem Achru Bezdin. Hayav Nimkar Bal Korcha Meicher Atzmai Minolan. So because he's sold against his will, because he's a robber, so it makes sense that he would be acquired, that they would sell him with kesef. However, Meicher Atzmai Minolan, how do you know that he can sell himself with money? So the Gemara says, Yalef Socher Socher. We learn Socher Socher. 1 second. Yeah. We learn that a Meicher Atzmai is called a Socher, and a Machnu Bezdin is also called a Socher. So therefore, we compare it to each other, and we say they both have Kinyan Kesef. Okay. So Gemara says, Hani Chalaman di Alef Socher Socher. This makes sense according to the opinion that learns Socher Socher. Elaman de Lo Yalef Socher Socher Ma'ik Lamemer. If we don't compare every slave, we don't compare different types of slaves to each other. Ma'ik Lamemer, what's the source that a regular Eved Ivri Nimkar Atzmai, he sells himself, has Kinyan Kesef? Okay, now the Gemara for the next day or so will be going on a goose chase to find out who is the opinion that does not want to learn Socher Socher. Who is that opinion? The Gemara has a difficult time finding it.
Are we going to find an answer?
I haven't gotten to the end. I don't remember yet. We'll get to it soon. Okay.
Was that the point of that? Is to say that there can't be Kinyan Kesef?
Sorry?
They don't want to learn it that way? Is that like the point of them not wanting to learn it to where Socher Socher is?
Not necessarily. Probably not. Okay. So Gemara says, Amar Kra v'chisasig, Moisef alin Rishon v'yilmed elyon mitachtig. 1 second. Okay. The chisasig is referring to a nimkar la'akom, a slave who sold to a non-Jew. And that continues from the discussion in Parshas. This is the I'm not sure which Parsha this is. This continues the discussion of selling a nimkar of nimkar bezdin and a nimkar la'akom. So, yeah, this is Parshas Bahar. That's where it is. Yeah. Okay, so here we're talking is the first parsha, talking about someone who's poor and sells himself as a slave. And the next parsha is basically he's sold to a non-Jew. So because we begin the parsha with v'chi and if, it means it's a continuation between selling a Jew selling himself and a Jew selling himself to a non-Jew. That tells me that the laws of above are learned to the laws of below. We compare the two of them, and we say just like an Eved, a Nimkar La'akom has Kinyan Kesef, so too a Nimkar Atzmai also has Kinyan Kesef. Okay, now we begin the search. Uman Tana Del Yalav Socher Socher, who's the opinion that does not equate all types of slavery to each other, of Eved Ivri slavery? The Gemara first proposes, hi Tana, it's this Tana, the Tanya we learned. So the main opinion here is, notes numerous distinctions between Nimkar Atzmai and Nimkar Bezdin. Somebody who sells himself, nimkar l'sheish, he sold for 6 years. The yeser al sheish, or more than 6 years, he can sell himself for as long as he wants. Machru bezdin and nimkar al sheish. If the court sells him because he's a robber, then he's sold only for 6 years. If he sells himself and he doesn't want to leave at the end of the 6 years, we do not drill his ear. He does not have that option. It's only machru bezdin nirtza. If the court sells him, then if he refuses to leave, we drill his ear and he stays until yovel.
I'm sorry.
If the court, according to this opinion,
Prior to the court, if he does what?
if he sells himself and he wants to stay past whatever time it was,
I just want to make sure it's clear.
Yeah.
I don't have a translation.
got it.
Then you might be careful not to sell yourself short.
Yeah. So if you sell yourself, there's no ritzia, there's no drilling of the ear. If the court sells you, then you could drill his ear. He sells himself. Ein manikin loy. We spoke about hanaka. These are the gifts that you give to a slave when he leaves. Not by Meicher Atzmei. If he sells himself, no gift. As I say, it's like the tipping industry. He sells himself. Well, you want to be tipped too? No justification. However, Machru Bezdin, if he was sold against as well, so it's a service commitment. He does a good job, manikin loy. You give him a nice tip at the end. You give him hanaka. By the way, the mitzvah of hanaka is whether or not he performed well. You're still obligated to give him the gifts. Somebody who sells himself, the master cannot give him a maidservant for reproduction. If the court sold him, the master could give him a shifra kananis. Rabbi Lozer says, Rabbi Lozer says both. There's no, effectively the summary of Rabbi Lozer is there's no difference. Both nimkar atzma and nimkar bezdin only 6 years. Zev is nirtza, both of them, if they don't want to leave, you drill their ears. The zev is manikin loy, both of them get hanaka. The zev is and both of them, Rabbi Moisel Shifra Kananis, the master can force them to live with a indentured maidservant. Okay, my love, it would seem the debate is as follows: the Tanakama yalav sacher sacher, Rabbi Lozer yalav sacher sacher. The simple explanation: Tanakama says sacher sacher. We compare nimkar bezdin to nimkar atzmai. And Rabbi Lozer says, no, they're not comparable. I'm sorry, Rabbi Lozer says they're comparable. Sacher, we compare them. All the laws are the same. And Tanakama says, no, the laws are not the same. Amr Taviyumi, Mishmed Abayas, or Taviyumi says the name of Abaya, not necessarily. Everybody holds a sacher. They're debating with regard to the understanding of the verses. And I have to go through each one on its own. The Tanakama, the Amr Meicher Atzmei, Nimkar L'Sheish, V'Yetzer Al-Sheish, the first difference is 6 years. A guy who sells himself, it could be for even more than 6 years. Only if the court sells him is it 6 years. Why? Because there's a limitation. When the court sells him, it says, he will serve you, specifically the one who's sold by a non-Jew will serve for specifically 6 years. But someone who's Meicher Atzmei can be sold for even more than 6 years. The Idach and Rabbi Lozer disagrees. The Avodcha actually tells me something else. It says that he will serve his master, but not an inheritor. Now, like we said before, we pointed out Shivud Deraisa. The question is, he will serve his sons, but not any other inheritor. A slave who's indentured for 6 years, who's sold for 6 years, will serve the sons, but not any other inheritor. Okay. How do the rabbis know that? The Idach Tanakama, how does he know that? Avodcha Chweniksev, the Torah says the word Avodcha second time. The Idach Ahula Hartzas Odin Huda Osa. The other Avodcha is to point out to the master that the guy ultimately gave up 6 years of his life to serve you, and you should appreciate that and give him a large gift. But it doesn't come to tell me that it's not a limitation telling me that that only a Nimkar Bezdin gets 6 years. Everybody is equal 6 years according to Rabbi Lozer. My time Tanakama to Amar Meicher Atzmei Ein Eretza. Tanakama says you sell yourself. There's no drilling of the ear. Why? Because there's a limitation with regard to someone who the court sells. His ear. What does that mean? Specifically, the ear of somebody who's a robber and the court sold him. The Idach, what does Rabbi Lozer do with the word oznai? Comes to tell me a different law. The Tanya, we learned Rabbi Eliezer says, how do we know that we drill his right ear? Nemar kan oizen, v'nemar lahalan oizen, malahalan yamin, afkan yamin. Just like the ear of the mitzvah, it's his right ear that we put the blood of the korban, the sacrifice in the mitzvah. So too, we drill the ear, the right ear of the slave who doesn't want to leave, who's a nimkar bezdin. According to Rabbi Lazar, it would be either a nimkar bezdin or a nimkar atzmei. The idach, and how does the Tanakama, the first opinion, know that you use the right ear? Lemakra oizen. Should have said oizen. We would say oizen from mitzvah. My oznai. Why is it plural? Oznai tells me two things. Number one, it's the right ear. Number two, it's specifically his ear, but a meicher atzmai does not have his ear drilled. The idach, according to Rabbi Lazar, the word oizen oznai, the fact that the word is plural, so you learn two things. The other thing is that a woman does not have her ear drilled. The idach and the rabbis, how do they know that a woman doesn't have her ear drilled? May ve'im yomer ha'eved v'loy amal. The eved will say that he doesn't want to leave, but the amal can't say that. Okay, v'idach, what does Rabbi Lazar do with that? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Lazar says that you have to request to stay forever, get your ear drilled while you're still a slave. Let's say the slavery is over, you can't say I'm not leaving. It's too late now. Okay, now how does Tanakama know that law that you have to make the claim that you want to stay while you're still a slave? And the fact that the word ha'eved is plural. Sorry, the word eved is repeated. It's double. The idach eved